Hello, hello, and Happy New Year, awesomes. My voice is in shape today, but we've got a little construction going on around the studio, so just bear with us. This is Regina coming to you on AWE Radio from my ABCD PNRM Talkcast. Shh, let's talk about getting it together. There's been no change to congressional or state legislature and leadership control. Everything is as previously reported. The House, now in Republican control, if leads as it began its origin, that is, electing a speaker, it will be more of a mess and disruptive body than previously thought. The Senate, led by a Democratic majority, through the grace of God and maybe a miracle or both, appears to be on the road to some semblance of bipartisan cooperation with GOP counterparts. Fingers crossed. And the president is still Joe Biden and Democratic as well, dealing with unexpected problems of his own. A news flash in case you didn't know it. Documents unknowingly left behind were found, possibly some classified, at one of the president's previous official temporary transition residences. Reportedly dealt with appropriately by securing from others, notifying the National Archives immediately, turning over to NARA, that's an acronym for the National Archives, and overnight, and them reporting it to them, to the DOJ for investigation. Supposedly, this happened a while ago and wasn't revealed to the public, and the president says he was not aware immediately, but when aware, told by attorneys to keep his distance from the situation. But, as always, it came to light prematurely, sooner than DOJ wanted, and 45 and his people seized on it immediately to liken it to his intentional document stealing, hoarding, hiding, withholding, obstructing, and we don't know whether secret sharing, deliberate retention and mishandling of thousands of documents, many classified and other that we just don't know that we have them all. He took from the White House when he left office. Now, the real deal as reported by CNN Politics. The bottom line up front. Among the items from Joe Biden's time as vice president discovered in a private office at Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, a think tank in Washington, where he maintained an office after he left the presidency in 2017 until shortly before he launched his 2020 presidential campaign. It was affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania and continued to operate independently of the Biden administration. Last fall, there are about 10 classified documents, including U.S. intelligence memos, briefing materials that covered topics including Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdoms, according to a source familiar with the matter. The documents were discovered on November 2nd, just 6 days before the midterm elections, but the matter only became public Monday due to the news reports. The classified documents were dated between 2013 and 2016, according to sources. They were found in 3 or 4 boxes, also containing unclassified papers that fall under the Presidential Records Act. What do we know so far? The vast majority of the items in the office contain personal Biden family documents, including materials about his son Beau's funeral arrangements and condolences letters, the source said. It is not clear if the boxes with classified documents contained personal materials. The source said that the personal lawyers for Biden was closing out the downtown D.C. office that Biden used as part of his work with the University of Pennsylvania, The lawyer saw a manila folder that was labeled personal, opened the envelope, and noticed there were classified documents inside. The lawyer closed the envelope, immediately alerted the White House counsel's office, which notified NARA, which took custody of the documents the next day. The source here is The Guardian, WikiLeaks, and Wikinews. Richard Sauber, special counsel to the president, has said a small number of documents with classified markings were discovered on 2 November 2022 in a locked closet at the center as Biden's personal lawyers were clearing out the offices. I would assume that is an official statement. Biden says he was surprised to learn government records were there at all. After making contact with the National Archives, Biden's team turned over several boxes in an abundance of caution, even though many of the boxes contained personal materials, the sources said. Biden's response? He didn't know. There were private office after he had left the vice president, and that the attorneys did exactly what they were supposed to do. He was surprised. Here's his response to reporters when they questioned him in Mexico. I don't know. The documents were found in a box, locked cabinet, or at least a closet. So people want to know. I mean, they know I take care of classified documents. I think that's very important. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has assigned the U.S. Attorney in Chicago a holdover from the Trump administration to investigate the matter. Garland made this move after receiving a referral from the National Archives. Larsh is his name, was one of the rare Trump-era holdovers who wasn't told to resign after Biden's inauguration in 2021. And Illinois Democratic senators supported the decision to keep him at the post, in part because he was handling the politically sensitive investigation of a former Democratic Illinois House Speaker indicted on corruption charges. This U.S. Attorney in Chicago has already completed the initial part of his inquiry and provided his preliminary findings to Merrick Garland. A law enforcement source says he has briefed Garland multiple times, and at this point the source says he thinks he's finished and will not undertake any additional fact-finding. No additional briefings are scheduled, but would be conducted if necessary, the source says. The Attorney General has received a preliminary report on the documents inquiry and now faces the critical decision on how to proceed, including whether to open a full-blown criminal investigation. Garland was also personally involved in some of the key decision-making relating to Trump's documents investigation and the decision to send the FBI to search Mar-a-Lago. In the Trump matter, Garland tapped special counsel Jack Smith to take over both the criminal investigation into Trump's post-2020 election activities and the inquiry into classified documents the former president had taken to his Florida resort. The Biden probe is nowhere near that stage. Drawing a contrast between the two, Joe Biden, he had 10 total documents, some top secret. He's cooperating. The lawyers found and alerted the archives. On the contrary, Donald Trump, at least 325 total documents, 60 top secret under investigation for obstruction. Archives first reached out to Trump's lawyers. The turn of events with classified documents found at Biden's former office has forced some politicians into a tough spot. Trump has responded with a spate of social media posts lampooning Biden and publicly egging on the FBI to search Biden's offices and even the White House for handled documents. Key Democrats in Capitol Hill have expressed confidence in Biden's handling of these documents material, even though classified records turned up in a place where they weren't supposed to be. Newly empowered House Republicans have already pledged to broaden their oversight probes to include the Biden documents, matters, and some are saying NARA as a target of additional scrutiny. Now, Biden's classified document issues adds to House Republicans' growing list of investigations. One representative, who now chairs the House Oversight Committee, swiftly sent letters to the White House counsel's office and the National Archives, which his committee oversees. Among the requests made in the letters were all documents retrieved from Biden's personal offices, where the classified documents were found, a list of people who had access to that office, all documents and communications between the White House, Department of Justice, and National Archives regarding the documents that were retrieved, and all documents and communications related to the handling of classified materials by Biden's personal lawyers, including their security clearance statuses. Wow. The Kentucky Republican asked that documents and other information be turned over no later than January 24th. Real quick. He's not giving them a lot of time to get that done. Also on Tuesday, the new GOP chair of the House Intelligence Committee asked the director of the National Intelligence to conduct a damage assessment for the classified records found at the Biden's private office. Those entrusted with access to classified information have a duty and an obligation to protect it, said this Ohio representative. This issue demands a full and thorough review. Tables turned, conversation much different. Wow. Right? What a change of events. And a gift we've given, or the Biden administration has given to the right. The story doesn't end here, though, says my source, the CNN Politics. Now, Biden still faces far less legal exposure than Trump, but he still faces exposure. Everything publicly known about this controversy so far appears to be that there are clear differences between the two cases. There's no reason yet to doubt the statement by senior White House lawyer Richard Sauber that the documents were inadvertently misplaced and that this did not amount to a case of mishandling classified documents. Still, the White House selective transparency this week does raise some questions of credibility. These doubts, however, pale in comparison to the behavior of 45. Whereas the president appears to have quickly cooperated with the National Archives after the discovery of the first of the small number of documents, 45 apparently spent months stonewalling requests for the return of the hundreds of pages of classified documents. Biden, unlike Trump, never claimed the documents were his personal property or made fantastical claims that they had been declassified by private thought. That's why there is, therefore, no sign Biden is being investigated for obstruction. As is the case for the former commander-in-chief, there is reason to think the White House claims that the affair can be quickly cleared up and the president will be exonerated could be borne out. But the glaring vulnerability for Biden is that while the two cases can be separated legally, they are politically intertwined. Any conclusion after twin special counsel probes that cleared Biden but accused Trump of wrongdoing would cause uproar among representatives wherever the relative facts of each case. To a voter not following every twist of the drama, it will be easy for Republicans to argue that Biden's Justice Department is pursuing Trump for a transgression of which the president is also guilty. The intense political sensitivity of investigating a former president and current presidential candidate prompted Attorney General Merrick Garland to name Jack Smith as the special counsel for the Trump investigations last year. When Biden then also had a classified document problem, it was therefore almost inevitable, given suggestions of double standards, that a second special counsel would also be named. Merrick Garland clearly taking steps to protect the Justice Department after it was repeatedly drawn into politicized investigations in recent years, picked a former Trump administration Justice Department appointee, Robert Hur, to investigate the possible unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents or other records. Hur will also have the authority to probe any matters that arose from the initial investigation handled by the U.S. Attorney in Chicago and anything that may arise directly from his own investigation. Democrats may hope that the choice of a lawyer with clear credentials who was a Trump appointee may insulate her against political attacks. But McCarthy has already signaled to his conference in the House that there can be open season on the White House, and past experience suggests her should brace for a political backlash. The transactional nature of political outrage is already evident. The spectacle of Republicans who repeatedly downplayed Trump's far problematic retention of classified documents, now gravely talking about the sanctity of intelligence information, is extraordinary. GOP lawmakers, goaded by conservative television, are already trying to suggest that Biden may have endangered U.S. national security with the way the documents were stored. Now you'd think everything was good and under control. We've got the special counsel for both investigations. Well, hold up. There was a second set of Biden documents found at a separate location. As White House addresses first discovery at Biden's Institute, the report hands fresh ammunition to the Republicans, comparing the discovery to Donald Trump's mishandling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Source here still The Guardian. The White House was already on the defensive after revelations that classified documents were discovered last November. Then came a report from the NBC News network, following by other media outlets, that said that the president's aides had found another set of classified documents at a separate location. The classification level, number, and precise location of the material was not immediately clear. They added, in the case of the classified documents, it's more serious for Trump than Biden, but the allegation handed fresh ammunition to draw a false equivalence with a Justice Department investigation into former President Donald Trump's mishandling of documents at the Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida. Josh Hawley, a Republican senator for Missouri, an ardent Trump defender, responded to the disclosure by tweet. Special counsel was his only words. Karine Jean-Pierre, who is the press secretary for the White House, faced tough questioning from a White House press corps starved of scandal since the end of Trump's presidency. She declined to say how the documents came to be at the office or when Biden was informed of their existence, or provide assurances that other materials would not come to light. She said, I know you are going to have a lot of questions on this, but at this time, I'm not going to go beyond what the president said yesterday, which was he was surprised and where they were. I'm not going to go beyond my colleagues from the White House counsels shared with many of you as well on Monday. I want to be prudent here and make sure that my colleagues really, truly handle this issue. Asked why it had been so long for the existence of the documents to be disclosed, she replied, this is under review by the Department of Justice. There was an unusually acrimonious exchange with a White House correspondent of CBS News who pointed out that President Biden had, when he took office, acknowledged that he would make mistakes, but he would not acknowledge them, and he would, be transparent. Well, in response, the press secretary said, we don't need to have this kind of confrontation. Ask your question. The situation contrasts sharply with that of Trump, who had about 360 documents with classification markings, including some that were recovered in the FBI search after his lawyers provided a sworn certification that all government records had been returned. The distinction between the Biden and 45 cases is likely to be lost on many voters, especially as Republicans and right-wing media capitalize on the apparent misstep and accuse the Justice Department of double standards. Congresswoman and Congressman Jim Jordan, chair of the House Representatives Judiciary Committee, said the American public deserves to know earlier about the revelation of Biden's classified documents. They knew about this the week before the election. Maybe the American people should have known that too. They certainly knew about the raid at Mar-a-Lago before the election, but it would have been nice if on the 2nd of November the country would have known that there were classified documents at the Biden Center. We'll watch this space and keep you updated as things unfold, but it is truly something. Okay, let's get back to our topic of democracy. Democracy resultant of the midterm election was definitely a win and put democracy on the right track in the singular sense of the American people saying they wouldn't tolerate all the dysfunction, MAGA views, denialism, just right outlies, and wanted more honest politicians and political discourse. Well, that has been overshadowed by the new GOP House processes and rules and the insurrection and anti-democracy sentiments being peddled around the world by the same folks tearing down our democracy, democratic principles, small d, here in the United States. Democracy defenders continue standing strong to exemplify the country stronger together mantra, to traverse the line minions put in the place by the 118th Congress. House changes coming up, which will allow the country and the world to stay on the same page. They see the U.S. as the example, and we are teetering on failure in that department with all of the shenanigans happening by the distractors. So, all right, the it today is democracy still on the declining, why we're here, how we got here, and the way forward. The incoming Congress is the 118th Congress. It was eventually constituted after about 4 days of voting, 15 actual ballot votes. The sources are Wikipedia and Wikinews. On January the 3rd, 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, Congress convened. Members-elect of the United States Senate were sworn in, but members-elect of the United States House of Representatives could not be sworn as the House adjourned for the day without electing a speaker. As of Thursday, January 5th, the third day of speaker voting, the House has still failed to elect a speaker despite conducting 6 ballots. When the speaker election concludes, the victor will swear in the members-elect and direct the House to begin conducting rules for the session. Meanwhile, the Democratic majority Senate, Vice President Harris swore in the most senior senator, Washington State Democrat Patty Murray, as President pro tempore on Tuesday, January 3rd. Murray is the first woman to serve in that role and is now third in line in the United States presidential line of succession. The Senate began adopting rules Tuesday afternoon. In summary, after 4 days and 15 votes, with a majority of votes cast, McCarthy was elected Speaker at 12:37 a.m. Saturday morning. Then he and all of his members were sworn in, even George Santos, the lying-cheating imposter from New York, who won his seat, out-MAGA-ing the staunch MAGA Republicans. It's a story for another day. A vote Kevin McCarthy desperately needed to get the gavel because of the Freedom Caucus 20-vote Never Kevin opposition to McCarthy's speakership. I mentioned in our last meeting that the minority leader was giving away his impending power to different factions of his conference to try to pull in the requisite 218 votes needed to win the speaker's title. Well, over 4 days and 15 speaker votes, the landscape changed from who opposed him for the position to who opposed him to take the position and how many votes he actually needed to take the gavel. In anticipation of right-wing opposition to McCarthy's election as Speaker, Don Bacon of Nebraska threatened to form a coalition of moderate Republicans who would work with the Democrats to successfully install a speaker. Several names were floated as a potential compromise candidate, the most prominent of which was Fred Upton, a moderate Republican who had been the representative for Michigan's 6th congressional district up to his retirement in the 2022 election cycle. McCarthy and his supporters spent December and the first days of January negotiating with right-wing opponents of McCarthy to persuade them to support him on the floor. At the closed-door meetings shortly before the speaker vote on January 3rd, Mike Rogers of Alabama threatened dissident Republicans with removal from House committees. Prior to the vote, Politico reported that at least 5 Republican representatives had refused to support McCarthy, while another 9 had not publicly commented on whether they would, as the Republican Party won a slim majority, 222 to 212, and assuming Democratic members do not vote for him, McCarthy could only sustain as many as 4 Republican members voting for other candidates, or 9 Republican members either voting present or not voting at all for McCarthy to be elected as Speaker. It was reported that these representatives demanded that McCarthy make concessions before these representatives would support him, such as lowering the barriers for caucus members to force a vote to remove a sitting Speaker and other procedural matters. Representative Chip Roy of Texas became a leader in the negotiation process for the holdouts to McCarthy's speakership nomination. The goals were to bring the 20 Republicans to bring down the threshold for calling a vote of no confidence against the Speaker to 1 member. More enforcement to allow more time to read bills, a greater role for the House Freedom Caucus in Republican leadership, requiring Republican leadership to refrain from being involved in primary elections, and an end to U.S. aid to Ukraine. Okay, the details. I told you it convened on the 6th. So on the first day, there were 3 ballots. On the first ballot, the Republican Speaker got 203 votes, and the Democratic Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, got 212 votes, and there were 19 Republicans who voted for other candidates. So there was not a polarity of votes, so nobody won that first vote to be Speaker. On the second ballot, McCarthy got 203, with Jeffries getting 212. The Democratic caucus was unanimous and stayed strong. There were 19 Republicans voted against McCarthy. He still didn't have the votes, so no candidate received the outright majority, so there was no Speaker for the second vote. On the third vote, the ballots were McCarthy 203 with Jeffries at 212, and there were 20 votes for Jim Jordan, and again, there was no winner for the speakership. After the third ballot, the representative from Oklahoma requested about 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time that they would adjourn until 12:30 the next day, and the motion was approved by a voice vote. On day 2, ahead of the fourth ballot of voting, the former president, 45, reaffirmed his support for McCarthy to be Speaker of the House and urged all House Republicans to vote for him. Kat Cammack of Florida described those who did not vote for McCarthy as the radical 2%. Ralph Norman of South Carolina, one of the Republicans opposed to McCarthy, stated that McCarthy would win over additional votes from the Republican holdouts by committing to shutting down the U.S. government over raising the U.S. debt ceiling. After a quorum on the fourth ballot, the votes for McCarthy were 201, and for Jeffries was 212. There were 20 members who did not vote for McCarthy, and they voted for Jordan in the third. They had voted for Jordan in the third vote. There was, on the fifth vote, McCarthy got 201, Jeffries got 212, and Donalds, who was, in my estimation, the Republicans' answer to offset the minority disparity between the Republican conference and the Democratic caucus, with Jeffries, so that Donalds is a African American Republican from Florida, one-term congressman. On the fourth vote, there were not enough. Fifth vote, there were not enough people to pass the vote, so there was still not a speaker determined. 201, 212 to 212, and there were 20 people who voted for Donalds, the young man that I just mentioned, and all members voted the same for the on the sixth through the fourth and fifth vote, and there were 433 votes required to be cast. After reconvening, the House agreed to adjourn after the sixth vote until 8 o'clock the same day by voice vote. After reconvening, the House agreed again to push it off and come back the next day at 12 o'clock. Following the sixth vote, Politico reported that Donalds was unlikely to be the final choice of the anti-McCarthy Republicans, with the chair of the Republican Study Committee, Kevin Hern of Oklahoma, being floated as a potential candidate. After the sixth vote and ahead of the seventh vote, the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, offered several concessions. This is his first official offering. He allowed a single party member to motion for a vote to remove the Speaker. Now, that's to move him if he gets the Speaker's gavel. Appointing additional Freedom Caucus members to the House Rules Committee, that's the most powerful committee in the House. Holding votes on bills concerning congressional term limits in the United States and border security. And at the same time, the Congressional Leadership Fund, a super PAC aligned with McCarthy, reaching an agreement with the Club for Growth not to spend money in the primary election of Republicans in open districts that are considered safe seats for the party. So we come back on day 3. On the seventh vote, McCarthy still at 201, Jeffries at 212. Donald still gets 19. Trump, Representative Gates puts his name up. He got 1 vote, and 1 person voted present. So there were 433 votes cast, but still not a majority, so there's not a winner. On the 8th vote, 201, 212, and we've got 2 for Hern, we've got 17 for Donald, and we've got 1 for Trump again. No speaker elected. 9th vote, 200, 212, 17 for Donald, 3 for Hern, 1 present. There were only 432 votes cast because there was 1 person absent. 11th vote, similar result. On the after the ballot, the House voted to adjourn 12 to come back the next day at 12. Day 4, we went through votes 12 through 14, and as we finished the vote 14, McCarthy thought he had all of his votes, but Matt Gaetz still held out, and there was some drama because they were upset that he didn't vote as they wanted him to, and there were problems with that. But they were getting ready to ask for an adjournment. We were right in the middle of it, but they got him to agree to vote present, and they withdrew their vote to adjourn, and so we had a 15th vote that night, and McCarthy got 216 to Jeffries 212, and the threshold for winning was 215, so he got one more vote than he needed because there were 6 present votes. And the way the thing goes, the number is based on those people actually voting to how many votes you have to get. So following the election, everybody, we've got the votes, and everybody's know what's going on. This is like the most votes that we've had to have since 1923, and I think in 100 years or so. McCarthy wanted the gavel so much that it didn't matter to him how he got it or what he had to give up to get it, but he got it. So in a recap, we're going to start back into the things that we've done. All we're going to talk about today are just those issues. The wrap up on context. Like all governments around the world, the U.S. government is not the highest power, but the people. So we have to take that into consideration and make sure that our voices are heard, protest for what we believe in, sign petitions, get educated, donate, join causes that define us, not just in November for the presidential elections, but always. Thank you for tuning in. Hope I've given you something that enlightens you, brightens your perspective, and more importantly, empowers you. Next show, I'll continue with our awareness, go back to Article 4, finish that up, and move on to Article 5. We continue in more depth with outlining what's going on. So this is Regina Adams signing off, saying see you at the end of the week to give you something to share and take into the rest of your many weeks. Take care and keep getting it together.
Oh,